everyone, and welcome to another edition of MMO Weekly presented by Chitty Cheesesteaks. I am not Sal Manzo. That is not Mike Mayer. I am producer JL coming at you today, and joined with me today is MMO contributor and editor Mathias Altman-Kurosaki. Matthias, thank you for coming on.
Thank you for having me on, JL.
So, obviously, we're in a very jovial mood right now because the Mets just did something that I don't think any of us have ever really seen in our lifetime. So they were down 2-0 in the bottom of the ninth, in the top of the ninth inning against the Milwaukee Brewers, and when all hope seemed lost, Francisco Lindor, Brandon Nimmo, and Pete Alonso, along with Jesse Winker and Starling Marte, helped propel this team into the division series in one of the wildest games to add on to probably a really wild week for the Mets. So let us just dive right into it. Tell me, how were you feeling? What was going through your mind? And just tell me, how are you feeling and what did you experience before and after they were starting the comeback and then after?
I mean, I'll be honest. After the back-to-back home runs by Jake Bauers and Sal Frelick, I did not have much hope left. I was watching with my dad, and it felt like something was like there was nothing going right all of a sudden. Everything that went right on Monday and Tuesday, they couldn't get any of that. They only had 2 hits all night. They hadn't scored in 15 innings. You're about to face Devin Williams, who's been arguably the best reliever I'd say over the last 5 years, he's been one of the best relievers in baseball. You're thinking, how in the world are you going to put together a rally against this guy? You have to score 2 runs, not just 1 run. It's a 2-0 game now,
Mhm.
I did not have much faith. I'll admit it, but man, that was a crazy ninth inning, and I mean, you got to believe, I guess.
That's right. Hey, listen. Hey, that's what it's. Hey, you gotta believe. That's what we all say. I'll tell you. I was I was feeling very similar to how you were feeling. I was at the watch party on that night, and when Frelick, like you said, when Frelick hit that second home run, I kind of hunched over into my seat, and I said, "Well, I think the magic is over." The OMG and the Grimace, and funny enough, I had Grimace sitting right next to me. Funny enough. And it felt very disheartening. But then, Lindor came up and he got a walk. Okay, and then Nimmo comes up, he gets a hit, and now you're sort of starting to feel a little bit like this could possibly happen. And then of course Alonso hits that home run, and everything just goes absolutely bonkers. The place went absolutely ballistic, and I definitely can't wait to go to the next viewing party that they have. So now, just on touching on the characters in that comeback, obviously you talked about Devin Williams being a shutdown closer. With him being on the mound for that, how much more significant does that make that comeback, knowing that they did that against someone who was really probably one of the best closers in baseball, really?
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing is Devin Williams, like I said, ever since he came into the majors, or ever since he really became a regular, he won Rookie of the Year in 2020. He's been an All-Star multiple times. Yes, he had the injury earlier this season, but he got thrust right back into the closer's role. And Trevor McGill had done a great job as the closer before that. So it really shows how much confidence the Brewers had in him. And he didn't have to work hard the day before in his save. I think he threw fewer than 10 pitches.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, the fact that they did it against an all-star closer, it just makes it more impressive because he struck out Vientos for the first out, and again, he kind of looked off balance. I was like, he got ahead of Lindor first, 1-2 count. Lindor works the walk. Then he got ahead of Nimmo too, and then he lined the single. But really, you saw he went 3-1 on Alonso, and at that point, you're starting to think, all right, maybe they're getting to him. And sure enough, they got to him. But doing it against Devin Williams, doing it against any team's closer is really impressive because 99 times out of 100, you're facing the opponent's best reliever. But Williams is a guy who routinely is ranked in the top 3 to 5 relievers in baseball, so that makes it more impressive.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, absolutely. And if I'm correct, his changeup I think is called like the Vulcan changeup. If I'm
The airbender.
The Airbender, there we go, the Airbender. So I mean, that just kind of goes to show, I mean, this team can do anything with the magic of Grimace and OMG. And I know that's kind of repetitive, but I mean, just the fact that they were able to pull that off in that moment is just spectacular. But what is also spectacular too is just, I mean, Francisco Lindor. I mean, beginning of the season, fans are berating him, they're booing him, trying to kick him out of town. But not only has he stormed back to basically become this team's probably one of the greatest Mets of all time. That doesn't sound like a stretch at this point.
No, for sure, not anymore.
No, absolutely not. But also he seems to be doing the thing that we're paying him to, or they're paying him to, is to be big in clutch situations. So just kind of, you know, tell me, give me a little bit more of how you feel about Lindor and his impact on the club, and how him getting on base basically sparked everything, and also just sparked this whole team down the line through this whole stretch of getting into the playoffs in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, like you were saying earlier this year, I mean, he started out 1 for 31. And most guys can, let that spiral. They never get out of the hole. And look, he had a very I'll admit 2021 was a little underwhelming, but you saw throughout that season him getting better, I feel like. And you could see that over the course of full season where the team is succeeding, Lindor was going to be a key part of the team's success. And I think really this year it all came to a head. He called that team meeting back at the end of May. The team was 11 games under 500. Again, they could have easily just continued to spiral, never got back into the playoff race, but he sort of led that charge. First of all, going into the leadoff spot, which he hadn't really done at least since the Mets had gotten him. They shifted things around and everyone started to gel. And really, I think he's really a leader on the field, but also as shown by that team meeting he called, he's a great leader off the field. I'd say he's sort of the unofficial team captain because like I said, he leads by example. And it's more than he could have a rough day at the plate, but he goes out there in the field and he plays great defense. I mean, he got that last double play. That was I off the bat, I thought that he caught it in the air first, and then I saw that it bounced, and I saw him running over to second. I'm like, Bryce Turang is very fast. I don't know what's going on.
Yep.
He still turned that double play.
Yep.
This guy who he literally is putting the team on his back. I mean, he could have gone on the IL. He could have been out for the season, but he's back. He's playing through some pain, but he's still doing a great job. And that first at bat of the ninth inning, like I said earlier, he was down 1-2 in the count, and he just made Devin Williams work, and then worked a walk. He laid off a tough fastball. So, I mean, I don't know where this team would be without Francisco Lindor. It amazes me that earlier this season he was getting booed at his own ballpark because, I mean, it's honestly crazy that was this year. I mean, it feels like earlier this year everyone was having the discourse: is Francisco Lindor worth his contract? And that's an emphatic yes.
Yeah. And the funny part about that too is that there was sort of like, oh well, we should end up trading Lindor at the deadline. I've heard some of those takes, and it's all like, oh, he's not built for New York, and he doesn't mesh well with the vibe, and this and that and the fourth. But clearly, we've seen, like you mentioned, his leadership qualities shine through. And I'll mention two things. One is, when before he was injured, we had that debate about who should be the National League MVP. Now, granted, he's not hitting 50 home runs or gazillion RBIs, and I hate to use that term, but when he, like you said, when he's not hitting, he's still providing with the glove. And before he got hurt, I think there was a legitimate case that Francisco Lindor should be the National League MVP. So that's one way. And another thing that I noticed yesterday after the celebration was when he was being interviewed on ESPN. He cut the interview short because he wanted to take a photo with the team, and the emphatic welcome that he gave them with the slapping of the hands and the pumping up of the fists and all that really goes to show, and it adds to your point, that he really is the true leader of this team, and he's definitely been a spark plug. And we just really hope that there's more of that coming up, because we certainly need it. I don't think the Mets would be anywhere near where they would be at without Francisco Lindor. But speaking on another player that made a profound impact yesterday, as Bob Uecker affectionately called him on the Brewers radio broadcast, Peter Alonso, which he doesn't like to be called Pete. be called Pete. Um, of course, similar to Lindor, just absolutely getting destroyed online and on the discourse. He's in a contract year. He wants a very hefty paycheck. Scott Boras is his agent. And to be honest, and I'll say it here, he wasn't really working up to the amount that he wants. And I think his last extra base hit before yesterday was, I think, September 19th. And so you have a guy who has 50, maybe 60 home run type power, 125, 130 RBIs, and he's not living up to those expectations. So that's where a lot of that came from. But he essentially exercised the demon yesterday by hitting that 3-run homer. So just tell me your thoughts on Alonso, the home run yesterday, and what should we expect potentially going forward? And is this actually the Pete that we're going to get, or was yesterday just really kind of a one-off, so to speak?
Well, so I'll say this, that I feel like going into that at bat, his legacy with this franchise was squarely on the line. Because
Mhm.
yes, it was great when he hit 53 home runs and won Rookie of the Year. It was great when he won those 2 home run derbies and he set the franchise record for home runs and RBIs in the season. But really, like you were saying, this year he had not lived up to his potential, and he was getting skewered by everyone. It was more than just on social media. It just, it was tough to watch at times
Yes, it
because
was.
he was really coming out of his comfort zone. It seemed so obvious he was pressing, swinging at pitches, slider in the dirt. It felt like every time, just throw him a slider in the dirt, he would swing,
Mhm.
especially with men on base.
Yep.
And coming into yesterday, I mean, in the regular season, he hit 136 in late and close situations. So I remember when he came up, a lot of people were wondering, like, is Pete Alonso's last at bat going to be him getting out to end the season? He comes up with men on base, and what I liked about his at bat is that he didn't come unglued. He laid off the pitches that were out of the zone, and on that changeup, he could have overswung and yanked it foul or something, or overswung and popped it up, but he didn't overswing. I feel like, and he drove it the other way. He did a great job sitting back on Williams' changeup, which, like we said earlier, is one of the most unhittable pitches in baseball. So
Mhm.
I'd say that was really his first real big moment of the season. Because
Mhm.
before that, I saw someone mention it might have been the game-tying home run he hit against the Tigers back when the Mets were 0-5. So he basically went 5, 6 months without like a real signature moment this year. I would say last night that was his signature moment of his career. I
Yep.
mean, seriously, it does not
Mhm.
get bigger than that. And it does extend his Mets tenure. And, the thing with Alonso is that when he's hot, he hits home runs in bunches. So I think
Mhm.
there's reason to believe that he can keep this going against the Phillies, especially, a division rival. And I think, going forward, his Mets tenure, maybe this extends it a bit. Maybe he sticks around. Maybe if he heats up, I definitely think he will get more money. And maybe the Mets are willing to give him what he wants.
Right. And obviously, a strong performance will be indicative of, a type of contract that he'll get in the off season. But, I definitely do agree with your take on that this is the biggest home run of his career because again, you look at his total body of work and, you look at 23, you look at his season last year, and there weren't really that many moments you could kind of pick out of a hat. I mean, you could name more DJ Stewart moments in 23, and Alonso did sit for a period of time with, I think he had a broken hand, if I'm correct, because I think he missed the whole series in Pittsburgh and was only
He
out
he had to he
days.
had to. Well, yeah. The issue with that was that he got hit in the hand and then he tried to rush back. He came
Yeah.
back in the minimum 10 days and he really
Hmm.
struggled, and that's when the
Right.
team sort of fell out of contention. So I
Hmm.
mean, Alonso hit 46 home runs, but the way people talked about it, it was as if he did nothing all year.
Right, and it's crazy to even say that because he actually started out last season very hot, and the Mets were
Oh yeah,
still in it off of his back, and I feel like that kinda changed sort of, kind of a trajectory, and then coming into the contract year, he was, like, really pressing, like you say. But no, I definitely again, I do agree with the take that he definitely, turn he might turn a heel here. And then you think about it, your first two games are at Citizens Bank Park, and it's not exactly a pitcher's dream there, so to speak. And especially with colder October air, the ball might fly out a little more, especially if you kind of put a little umph onto it. So that I definitely hope to see. I definitely agree with. So I guess one more thing about the clincher was the performance of Jose Quintana. I mean, you couldn't have asked for a a more fitting and better performance from a guy that needed to come up the most, and another guy who has been lambasted by not only the fans but also the media when he's had a couple of bad starts. I think we've had maybe two or three Johan Santana type starts from our starters over the last week and a half. So just to touch on Q, uh, what did you see from him that kind of stood out more than his other starts? Um, what did you see him do that played to his strengths? And just kind of tell me, do you think that maybe, you know, this might be not just the one-off for Quintana as well?
Yeah, and I want to touch on your point earlier is that I remember he had a really rough month of August, and people
Mhm,
were saying that maybe he shouldn't be in the rotation anymore. Maybe he shouldn't be on the team anymore. And he's been fantastic. He's
mhm,
only allowed 2 earned runs since September 1st. And I'll say the best thing I think he did yesterday was he dodged the traffic. The
mhm,
Brewers had base runners in each of the first 5 innings. He only had one, two, three inning, but every time he worked out of trouble. He managed the contact. He got his swings and misses when he needed to. He's not a swing and miss type of pitcher. He doesn't throw particularly hard. I'd say he and David Peterson have similar profiles in the fact that they're lefties who don't necessarily overpower guys, but they know how to get the ground balls. They know how to get the swings and misses when they need to. And really, he did a great job. And also, the Brewers are a very speedy team, and they
mhm.
only stole one base on him. I remember yesterday Jackson Churio led off the game with a single, and I was thinking immediately, all right, he's probably going to try to steal second. He might end up on third by the end of this at bat.
Mhm.
He didn't let him advance past second. It's just a great veteran performance. He's had good postseason performances before. He outdueled Max Scherzer in 2017 when he was on the Cubs. He
Mhm.
threw a scoreless outing for the Cardinals in 2022. This is a veteran you can count on. And, the Mets needed that coming into this year. And he's proven he can be that guy. So I expect him to take the mound against the Phillies if necessary. And I think they can count on him for another big outing.
Right. And the thing that I really did like the most too, that I personally, maybe I noticed this, or maybe this is something that everyone else picked up on, but I've noticed that the as he's gotten better, he's gotten more aggressive with pitching into the
Oh, yeah.
strike zone. I've noticed that he's picked the corners a lot more this time around during this hot streak that he has, or even just his whole performance throughout the season, almost all of his solid starts. The thing that he does very well is he likes to pick the corners. I know he struck out a couple of guys um, last night by just painting that fastball, and it's only 91, 92. But again, it all depends on how much it moves, and the pinpoint accuracy that he can put also plays a part as well. So it's nice to see that, uh, you know, even though losing Kodai Senga, we've had guys like Quintana coming through. And speaking of Senga, we're going to transition right into the upcoming series preview, where we're just going to touch on what we think about this upcoming series versus Philadelphia, which, interestingly enough, I cannot believe that after all these years that the Mets and the Phillies have never played once in the playoffs, which I find to be absolutely ridiculous, considering how tied both the teams are. So, you know, Game one tomorrow, 4 o'clock, viewing party, City Field. See you there. Um, we found out today, as of taping this, that Kodai Senga will be the game one starter for tomorrow. So, Matthias, tell me, what do you expect from Senga? And how do you think that'll impact the team just as a whole going forward? And how do you think Mendoza would use him, being that he's been out for basic almost the whole year?
Yeah, I mean, it completely caught me off guard because they had said, all right,
Yeah.
Kodai Senga is in the conversation to be on the roster in the NLDS. What they didn't say was Kodai Senga is going to start game one of the NLDS. He's made one start this year, but I'm looking forward to seeing what he can do. He did pretty well against Philly last year, held them to a 1.46 ERA in two starts against them. I think he's not going to be working super deep into games. He threw 5 1/3 innings in his first start before he got hurt. And I mean, I think now, coming back from an injury, like I said, only one start, only got to make one rehab appearance, and he had to come out with tricep tightness. I can see him going about 4, maybe 5 innings, giving a pitch count. I'd probably say 60 to 70 pitches. And after that, they'll probably go to either Tyler McGill, who I thought was going to start tomorrow, or David Peterson as the long guy. And that's the thing with the off days. You'll play Saturday and Sunday. So they're going Senga game 1, Severino game 2, and then you figure Manaea in game 3, which means maybe David Peterson doesn't make a start this time around, in which case he can piggyback for Senga. I think that's how Senga's, if they advance, I think that's how he's going to be used. It'll be primarily as a guy, maybe he's more of an opener type, and then they go to another bulk guy after him.
Right. Yeah, I was thinking the same thing because you don't want to push him too far to kind of re-aggravate some sort of injury or maybe kind of put him in harm's way because Philly is very aggressive. But to your point, he did perform very well against the Philly team, which isn't really too much different from the team that they fielded last year. So, with that being said, obviously, the opponent is old friend Zach Wheeler. I saw some pieces that came out that basically said that, he has it out for us. I mean, he's had it out for us since he signed with Philly. So in thinking about the game that they beat Philly on Sunday Night Baseball, where essentially they just got, a base hit by Tyrone Taylor and then the Brandon Nimmo home run to give them the lead. How do you think the Mets will approach Zach Wheeler this time around? Do you think that they take the same approach, or do you think that they get a little bit more aggressive with the bats? Because it seems as if there's a way to get to him, but he's so masterful at what he does that it's kind of hard for teams to do that.
And he's a guy who really fills up the strike zone. So I think you have to be aggressive against him. You end up, being trying to be a little too patient, then you end up falling behind and count a lot. And so, if you get a first pitch fastball, you got to swing sometimes. And I think this is going to be a case where they do go after him pretty aggressively. I saw a stat though earlier that since the start of 2022, the Mets are 12-3 against Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. So, it's one of those things where I remember in 2021, Wheeler had a start against the Mets where he allowed a leadoff single to Brandon Nimmo and then retired the next 27 batters. But this is obviously a very, very different team from that. And I feel like, I saw the Mets put up 6 runs against him in 2022. I think they've proven they can hang with the Phillies for sure. They play. I thought the Phillies won the season series, but a lot of those games were tight. I think a lot of those games that the Mets lost were very winnable. So I think the Mets can handle that pitching staff, and they've proven that their pitching staff can match their pitching staff. And Wheeler's one of those guys. They were able to beat him this time around. Yes, he only allowed 2 runs in 7 innings, but I think this is a roster that, if they take the right approach, they can definitely beat him. And like I said earlier, I think you're going to see a lot of first pitch swinging, a lot of attacking early in counts, and I think that's the way to beat them.
Yeah, oh no, I was actually saying this to someone when I was driving today, that I don't want to say scared because that's not the best terminology for it, but I mean anything can happen. I could say this now and then have pie on my face by Monday, you know. But just looking off of what I've seen from Philadelphia so far, and then factor in with basically a pretty much a week layoff, they're not as big and bad as people put them out to be. I actually think the Mets would have had a harder time against the Atlanta Braves or the San Diego Padres than I would the Philadelphia Phillies. The only problem is Philly is a very aggressive team, so they'll catch you on a couple pitches and then you're down 5-0. But that's how they're built, obviously. But then also just thinking too, like Aaron Nola doesn't really perform well against the Mets. So do you think that, let's say they somehow manage to win game 1. Do you think Philly would have a shorter leash on Nola going into game 2, knowing that the Mets kind of do well against him? Or do you think that they're just going to try to let him loose and see what happens because he is one of their better pitchers?
Yeah. So also, supposedly they're going with Christopher Sanchez in game 2, and Rob
Oh.
Thompson said that they're going with Sanchez because of the environment at Citi Field. Which to be
Hmm.
fair, Aaron Nola did throw a complete game shutout at Citi Field earlier this year,
Yes,
and the Mets
yes, he did.
tattooed him at Citizens Bank Park.
Yep.
So I sort of see what he's doing with with that. But I think if the Mets beat Wheeler, then Sanchez is a workhorse. I'll say that
Hmm.
much. He's thrown multiple complete games this year. I think they will probably have a shorter leash because also they have a great bullpen. It's something that
Hmm.
had plagued them in years past, but now they have a slew of arms. Jeff Hoffman, Ryan Kerkering, Jose Alvarado, Matt Strom. You name it, and
Hmm.
they all seem to throw heat, and they're all very hard to hit.
Oh yeah.
So I think if they fall into a hole and they're down 1-0 in the series, you'll definitely see Rob Thompson empty the tank a little bit to try to win a game. And I'll say this for the Mets: it's very important that they steal a game at Citizens Bank Park. The Phillies are 54-27 at home this year, only 41-40 on the road. So it feels like if you win one of the games in Philly, you sort of put them on the ropes, and you have a much better chance to win. So that's going to
Hmm.
be, I think, the most important thing about this series is can you win in enemy territory?
Right. And that's kind of like a big adage in hockey too, where it's like you steal one on the road, go back home, and then it's basically a best of 3. And the same thing applies in baseball too. So one more thing, give me series prediction. Who do you think will be sort of a standout for this series? And do you think this team will be able to ride more on the magic of OMG and Kribis?
Yeah, so I believe in these Mets. I have the Mets winning in 5. And my standout, I'm going with Brandon Nimmo. Nimmo has homered off both Wheeler and Nola this year. He has 3 homers
Mhm.
against the Phillies overall this year. And I feel like he always tends to step up against the division rivals. I know he was great
Mhm.
against the Braves this year, had the highest
Mhm.
OPS on the team against the Braves, and had that big home run on Monday. Like I said, I think that at bat we saw against Devin Williams is sort of the start point for him. I think he's going to get going. I think he's going to have a huge series against the Phillies. So give me
Mhm.
the Mets in 5. Brandon Nim was going to be the standout performer.
Oh yeah. And I'm the same. I think they win in 5. I think it's going to be very grueling because this team never makes it easy for any of us. I honestly, the only time I can really pick out of my head when the Mets actually made it easy for me to a point was 2015 when they swept the Cubs in the championship series. But I think they win in 5. Um, I think they do steal one. I think they steal game 2 at home. Not really good news for me being in the stadium tomorrow. Um, but I think Pete Alonso, I think he hits a couple of home runs, and I think surprisingly enough, I think either Mark Vientos or Starling Marte will surprise us with a big game here or there. So, with that being said, that's all for us today here on MMO Weekly, presented by Chitty Cheesesteaks. Matthias, thank you so much for taking the time out to join me here, and please continue to check out our website. And let's go Mets!